uh, the excitement of Zoom.
Okay, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Wendy Weiss, and I use pronouns she and her. And I am the Programs and Membership Coordinator, and I will be starting us off today. Ellen Greenwood is here to lead us in this service. We have just a few announcements, and that is that we have an ongoing adult religious exploration class on Thursday evenings from 6:30 to 8. And we will be talking about the second agreement. So tune in, and if you need the link, please contact me. Just contact me through my email. And we also have our Compassionate Conversations have started back up again, and those are on the second and fourth Sundays at 9 a.m. before the service on the same link that we use for the service. So join us for any of those. Were there any other announcements, Ellen, that you know
of? Yeah, I think you were going to say something about our welcoming renewal team. I can just say that we are hoping to add another member or two to this team who helps us work on our regular continual process of being a welcoming congregation at Westside. And you'll hear a little bit about the welcoming congregation effort as I talked this morning too. So if you would like to help with that, we would love to have you.
And of course, check the newsletter and our website for any other updates as they come along. And again, welcome. And if you're new or if you've been here many, many times, we're so happy to see you. We're glad you've joined us today. And wherever you come from, wherever you're going, you're welcome here. And we look forward to getting to know you better if you're new. So, as we do when we're together in the sanctuary, we like to invite our singing bowl to sound, and it's a really great way to just tune in and come back to your center and to gather in this, even in this virtual space together. So if you'd like to close your eyes or keep your eyes open or turn to soft gaze while you hear the sounds and feel the vibrations, please do. Come into this space more fully.
And Wendy will light our chalice there in our sanctuary in our building on Fretz Road. And I will read these words. The words I've chosen for our chalice lighting this morning come from the beautiful poem that Amanda Gorman read recently at President Biden's inauguration. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And we also have a hymn for you this morning. This is one of the hymns that the UUA has made available for us to use in online worship. And it's the song Step by Step. This was a song that I loved long before I ever became a UU because I loved hearing one of my favorite folk musicians, John McCutcheon, do it. And I was really excited when I found that Westside was a church that had this song in the hymn book. After being at Westside, I especially fell in love with hearing Mary Donovan play this because it was one of her favorites too. So I always think of Mary when I hear Step by Step.
Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly none. And by union, what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none. Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly none. And by union, what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none.
Thank you, Wendy. That was beautiful, I thought. Well, for those of you who maybe don't know me, I don't know if there are any on this meeting or not, but my name is Ellen Greenwood and my pronouns are she and her. And I've been a member of Westside since 1993. That was a long time ago. So I've been asked to give you a brief look at the history of Westside relating to social justice. Well, when I came to Westside in 1993, Westside was still meeting in the rented space over on Kingston Pike. The Reverend Dillman Sorrells, their beloved first minister, announced her resignation on my first visit. So in those days, much of the congregation's energy was devoted to managing leadership. There was a very short-term interim ministry, and then at least a year, I think, of totally lay-led services, and then another interim minister was hired. In addition, those early Westsiders were determined to complete a church building, which is now our building over on Fretz Road. I recall also that many in the congregation felt strongly that the responsibility for social action rests with the individual, whereas the church should be more concerned with the free and responsible search for truth and meaning and with fostering a spiritual environment. Nevertheless, I remember that back in those early days on Kingston Pike, Westside took major responsibility for the construction of a Habitat for Humanity house, which is no small undertaking. I was still fairly new and I wasn't very actively involved in things at that time, so I don't know a lot about that project, but I'd like to hear more about it from some folks who were around back then. Not long after we settled into our new building, some of us began to feel the need to explore ways that our congregation could be more involved in the world outside our walls. Over the years, I have been active in many of WUC's social justice endeavors, and I want to share a few highlights of those with you. These are the times truly that I have been most proud to be a member of Westside. But please keep in mind that these really are just highlights. So if I forget or don't mention something that was your favorite thing we ever did, be sure and bring it up during coffee time. So here's my first wonderful memory. In March of 2003, in response to the United States invasion of Iraq, Westside members worked with the Oak Ridge Unitarian Universalist Church as they brought a woman named Rita Lazar to the Knoxville area as a speaker. Ms. Lazar, whose brother was killed in the World Trade Center attacks, was a spokesperson for the group September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. And these were, and still are, individuals who have lost family members in the attacks and were opposed to their loved ones being used as reasons to wage war. On the Friday night of her visit, we hosted a potluck at our congregation, and for the community, followed by a talk by Mrs. Lazar. I was overwhelmed by this event, as well over 100 people, Westsiders, other UUs, Presbyterians, Quakers, Mennonites, Muslims, and just peace-loving individuals united in our sacred space to hear her message. I've been especially proud of this congregation in our efforts to provide support and inclusion to the LGBTQ community. In 2006, Westside voted to oppose the state constitutional amendment banning marriage rights to same-sex couples. My heart swelled when WUUC was part of a half-page ad in the Knoxville News Sentinel, included with other local faith groups that had taken a stand against this hateful legislation, which unfortunately passed into law, but fortunately is now an unconstitutional law. And a few months later, we began to have serious discussions, which eventually led to Westside voting on May 4th, 2008, to request welcoming congregation status from the UUA. And this is one of those times now when you need to say one of those silent prayers and keep your fingers crossed and do all those things while I try to share my screen because I have some photos I want to share. Okay, Wendy, I'm disabled from screen sharing. Okay, how's that? This is the morning that we voted to request welcoming congregation status. I love these photos, this photo in particular. As I mentioned earlier, those of you who haven't been with us for a while won't know a lot of these people, but for those of us who have been around, it's wonderful to see all of these smiling faces. And this is really a momentous day. It came after at least a year of education, discussion, preparation, completing all the steps required to become a welcoming congregation, which is not at all in the terms, in UUA terms, a casual designation. It requires a deep and ongoing commitment to engage in intentional LGBTQ welcoming ministry. And as I mentioned earlier, it is ongoing, and we would love to have your help. Let's see how I do this. Okay. In October of 2009, a group of Westsiders, along with Unitarian Universalists from across the nation, joined 200,000 activists in the National Equality March in Washington, D.C., calling for equal protection for all LGBTQ people in all matters governed by civil law. And again, I have a couple of wonderful photographs. Here is our group with our Westside banner and our rainbow flag and our Standing on the Side of Love t-shirts, getting prepared on the streets of DC for the walk. And then this is just one of my all-time favorite photos. And I have to tell you, I have thought of this photo numerous times since the very sad and tragic events this past January 6th. Here in Knoxville, WUC is frequently represented in Knoxville's Pride Fest. And so I've selected just a few of the photos from over the years. This one is in 2009. We were small in number, but strong in spirit that year. There's Mary and Mary are with us, and Barry and Pete. And if I'm not mistaken, that photo was taken by, I think by TJ Blazing, but I'm not for sure. And then here's our group in 2014. And there are quite a few young people in this group. These young people were part of a project we were working on at that time called Spectrum West. And I'm going to talk about Spectrum West in just another minute or two. But first, here's our last 2019 group. This is another of my very favorite photos in all the world. I hope that this is what Westside and Pride look like in years to come, whenever we are able to be out there again. But as part of our dedication to being a welcoming congregation, for several years, Westside hosted a gathering that we called Spectrum Cafe West, modeled after a similar cafe that Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church hosted for many years. Our purpose was to provide a safe and supportive social gathering for LGBTQ high school youth. We disbanded after several years because, for any number of reasons really, but our attendance was very low. However, I have fond memories of all the teens who attended and of the caring adults who gave up many Saturday afternoons to help create this safe space. And over the years, another way that Westsiders have represented our UU values in the wider community has been by walking in the annual Martin Luther King Parade in downtown Knoxville. Our numbers were usually rather small, partly because in the middle of January in Knoxville, it tends to be bitterly cold. But I've always believed that it is important for our Black neighbors to know that there are white folks from a congregation in West Knox County who walk with them in honor of the teachings and the legacy of Dr. King. And another way, or another issue that Westsiders have responded to over the years is homelessness. At one time, we provided and served meals at regular intervals for a volunteer ministry center in downtown Knoxville. A few of these times, not all, but a few, coincided with the Martin Luther King holiday, when we opted to honor Dr. King with service rather than by walking in the parade. Volunteer Ministry Center's current program has eliminated the need for us to do this meal, but I selected a couple of photos here of our group. I chose this one especially because Sue Draper was in it. It's important to remember that each of these meals involved numerous other Westsiders who donated food but did not go to the center to serve. And now I'm going to stop sharing and okay, hopefully we're back. Without a doubt, Westside's most significant effort to combat homelessness is our participation in Family Promise. In normal pre-COVID times, Family Promise congregations host homeless families, usually 2 to 4 families at a time for a week each quarter. We provide a place for the night, an evening meal, breakfast snacks and other snacks during the host week. Hosting through Family Promise is not easy for our congregation because of our size, but we have dedicated volunteers in our community, and we have a wonderful support congregation in Farragut Presbyterian. And also we get support from Grigsby Chapel United Methodist across the street from us. These days, families are staying at the Family Promise Day Center with congregations providing meals. And I know that many of you helped out during our last host week. For the most part, social justice work involves outreach. But sometimes we have to start with ourselves. A significant part of the welcoming congregation process, for example, is educational. With this in mind, we have offered forums, discussion groups, lunch and learn sessions to the congregation, and in some instances to the community on issues of social justice. Topics have included immigration, reproductive rights, reconsidering Thanksgiving, and numerous others. Most recently, we have used book discussions to initiate conversations around topics related to justice. And I can't talk about social justice at Westside without mentioning that many of our members are actively involved in justice work on their own. Elizabeth Corbett, for example, is a brave and determined advocate for the immigrant community. We try to be supportive, but she's the one making connections and making a difference. Charlie Dudney is another. He's been actively involved with the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program for many years. WUUC supports his efforts by providing space for the work they do here in Farragut. And several Westsiders, including Craig Brandt and probably some others I don't know about, work with him. Additionally, they reach out to folks in the downtown area who often are in desperate need of tax preparation assistance. Jerry and Alice Thornton volunteer with the Sierra Club to make sure that young children have quality experiences in the natural world. A group of Westsiders, including our board president, Gretchen Weingartner, went to Washington, D.C. 4 years ago to participate in the Women's March. And so many others showed up for the march downtown in Knoxville. And I know there are other folks and other efforts that I'm leaving out. Folks who read in the schools, who tutor kids, who deliver mobile meals. So I apologize if I left you out. And I feel that I would be dishonest if I did not mention that advocating for justice work has not always been easy here at Westside. I'm sure that those of us who do have sometimes been considered troublemakers. What this congregation lacks in racial diversity, we make up for in ideological diversity. Through the years, we continue to attract folks who are seeking more for a liberal religious and spiritual home than for social activism. On the other hand, Westsiders are some of the most generous people I have ever known. I can't remember a collection or an appeal of any kind that has not been an overwhelming success. Recently, I came across a quotation from Charles Dickens, who was, by the way, a Unitarian. And he is supposed to have said, "Do all the good you can and make as little fuss as possible." And in many ways, this seems to describe our congregation. Of course, there are some of us who can't resist making a fuss sometimes. And that's when we have to remember the words that are attributed to Francis David, the founder of the Unitarian Church in Transylvania. We need not think alike to love alike. For many of us, in fact, most of us, I imagine, the pandemic has put a lot of our social activism and volunteerism on hold. Events of the past year have changed us in ways that we cannot yet fully comprehend. As we look ahead, we need to consider what social justice may look like for our congregation in the future. And I hope to hear some of your thoughts on this as we move on into our coffee hour. And so I think we can go ahead and extinguish our chalice.
And while we extinguish the flame of our chalice, its light is carried forward in our hearts as we walk in truth, work for justice, and stay connected until we meet again.